great lineup today. As you can see from the screen, we have a big panel, so lots of great discussion. And three of those panelists are board members from Missouri Main Street. So we have a very engaged board, just as you do in your Main Street communities. And so we love it when our board members help us out. And we have committees within our Main Street Board of Directors also. And so these are three representatives of our Historic Preservation Committee. So we're very excited about that. We'll give folks just another minute or two to come in. And Ben, if you'll move to the next slide. Ben's driving today. I'm going to talk about, while people are coming in, you're coming in webinar mode, so you're automatically muted. You're not able to share your screen. So you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. We do have a way, though, for everyone to interact, and we want you to interact with us. And so there's a Q&A at the bottom that you can ask questions, and you can ask those questions during the presentations. As you think of those questions, go ahead and type them in, and then we'll curate it towards the end. We'll let them all speak, and then we'll do the questions at the end. But feel free to do that as we go through. And then next slide, Ben. I'm going to do a little commercial for our conference coming up in July, our state conference. It's all about preservation and upper story development. So we're excited about that. It's in Kansas City this year. It's July 30th through August 1st. We'll have educational tours. We'll have a deep dive. We'll also have, of course, sessions, opening keynote speakers, the evening of excellence, all the fun things that we do at the state conference. If you haven't attended the state conference before, highly recommend that you do it. It's a great environment, and hope to see you there. All right, Ben, I think we're ready to get started. Take it away.
Yeah, so I am happy to be joined by actually 5 panelists today. As Keith mentioned, 3 board members. And so I'll introduce them. They're all going to be doing different parts of this webinar. So first, Dr. Stephen Hoffman is the coordinator of the Historic Preservation Program at Southeast Missouri State University and has been instrumental in helping to save and preserve much of Cape Girardeau's history, such as the Esquire Theater, and helping to list multiple significant places on the National Register of Historic Places. And he is actually joined by 2 of his students from the Southeast Missouri State Historic Preservation Program. And then after that, I'm going to turn it over to Bridgette Kelch, who is a longtime previous executive director of the Downtown Washington Inc. Main Street Program, and then working with the organization, saved multiple historic buildings that the organization now owns and is used to generate income for the organization. And then Karen Bode Baxter has worked for over 40 years as a preservation consultant on historic building renovation projects, historic tax credit projects, historic structures reports, and National Register nominations all over the United States. She also has extensive knowledge working with historic downtown redevelopment programs connected with the National Main Street Center in Iowa and Oklahoma. And as you can see on the screen, each one of them is a board member of Missouri Main Street Connection. So first, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stephen Hoffman, and he is going to talk about why preservation and places are important.
Thank you, Ben, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. What we wanted to do today was really to talk about the power of place. And I know we spend a lot of time in Main Street talking about sort of the economic benefits of historic preservation, but today we really want to kind of shift gears and really focus more on place and how place is important and why it's important. And there are a variety of non-economic reasons why we should be concerned about place. Ben, if you could go to the next slide. There are like social, cultural, aesthetic reasons in terms of thinking about place that our historic places really are our connection to community identity and memory. There's a certain charm and beauty to historic buildings. Stuart Brand, who was the author of How Buildings Learn, once asked the question, what makes a building come to be loved? And what he discovered in his research was that it was really just age, that any building that's older than 100 years will be considered beautiful no matter what. And we're looking here at two buildings in Cape Girardeau that are well over 100 years. And many of us have these in our communities. And these are buildings that help form our sense of identity. Ben, if you could go to the next slide. Tom Mays, who was the deputy counsel for the National Trust for Historic Preservation, wrote a book called Why Old Places Matter. I mean, and if you haven't had a chance to read it, I highly recommend it. He talks about 14 reasons why old places matter. And we're not going to talk about all 14 today, but he really leans into this idea of collective identity, the continuity for communities, right? It's how we tell our stories about ourselves. It's really our sense of community, our memory of who we are, both as a community, but also individual identity and memory. Old buildings really kind of have a holistic connection to who we are and our place in the world. And Tom talks about that old buildings are like memories that you can touch. And these buildings are really important for this sense of place attachment. And so, Ben, if you could advance to the next slide. Here we go. Place attachment. So this is a concept I think most of us are familiar with in terms of people becoming attached to place. And all of the research shows that when you have greater degrees of place attachment, you have a greater economic health, higher local GDPs. Our buildings form a kind of emotional infrastructure. There are a number of people who've written about this, people like Peter Kageyama, Melody Warnick, about how people connect to place and what the positive benefits of that are for the local community. And the research also shows that historic environments are stickier. They're easier for people to make place attachments to. They resonate more strongly in terms of those connections of memory and identity. In the next slide, I have information on a study that was done actually by a former student of mine, Jeremy Wells, and one of his colleagues that looked at place and looked at design. And they compared two very similar designed environments, a new urbanist community and historic Charleston, South Carolina. And as you can see in the images, the physical characteristics of these buildings, they're all very similar. But what they found is that people had stronger place attachment to the historic neighborhoods. And they posited that it had to do with the way in which older historic sites stimulate imagination. And if you have been, and I'm quite certain everybody on this webinar has been in a historic building or in a historic place, and you imagine the things that have happened before, and it allows you to connect to the greater stream of the human experience. The authors talk about spontaneous fantasy, right? This idea that when we're in these places, it allows our imaginations to go, further than, when we're in newer environments. There were also some studies done, and Ben, if you could advance to the next slide, by several studies done by the National Trust in England, and they highly scientific, doing brain imaging scans, and part of what they determined was that significant places generate greater attachment. And these greater attachments promote positive emotional responses. And these positive emotional responses have physical and psychological benefits, which is why people seek them out, and which is why it's important for us to preserve them. And so hopefully you can see there's a lot of research about how setting economic benefits aside, when we think about place attachment and historic preservation, it really supports the idea that these kinds of spaces enable people to experience enhanced and physical, psychological health. We also know there are two types of significant places, and you can move to the next slide if you want, Ben, because I'm kind of introing this here. Two kinds of significant places. Landmark buildings and iconic places in our communities, and I think we can all think of those, but also more ordinary streetscapes, both of which are important in creating places that people want to be. And so earlier this semester, I had my students conduct some interviews with people about their perspectives on why historic places in the community were important to them. And we found that people identified both iconic places and ordinary places as being important to them. And their sense of importance of these places involved their roles in both the focus of personal memories and their own histories, their own connection to this place, but also more broadly as places where others could form memories and attachments in the here and now. We conducted 6 interviews in total. In 3 interviews, we wanted to engage in telling a more inclusive story about the American experience. And so we had 2 interviews about an African-American church, Holy Family, and 1 interview about our public square and its recently recognized association with our community's African-American history. For the other 3 interviews, we focused on our downtown district specifically and interviewed someone who grew up in town and got involved with the downtown later in his career, someone who grew up in town and is a young entrepreneur today and active in our downtown organization, and a transplant to the community from elsewhere who got involved in downtown after she retired. And so we've invited 2 students, Molly McNabb and Jennifer Wiesner, to share their experiences doing these interviews and to share what they found out from talking to people in Cape Girardeau about the importance of place in their lives, and not just the importance of place, but the importance of preserving place and of celebrating the preservation of place, which, is really what Preservation Month is all about. So, Molly?
All right. Hi. Thanks, Dr. Hoffman. So I'm going to be specifically talking about the power of place in association to the memories that people make in specific places, because places are found to be powerful because people make memories there throughout their lives. So as Dr. Hoffman said, our class conducted some interviews with people from the community about why specific places were important to them. And for some of them, these memories started young. In the cases of the Holy Family Church, we talked to former students that they used to have a school there, and one of the former students remembered that as a place that made them who they are today. That it formulated the person that they are. So they had specific memories of their time as a child there. But other people, when we talked to them about Holy Family, they remembered other memories, like they got married there or spending time with their family. And these places just had specific meanings to different people. And places are important because of the experience that can be made there, but also looking towards the future of experiences. This can be seen in the Riverfront District. Many people in Cape Girardeau have memories spending time at the river. as Dr. Hoffman said, one of our interviews was someone who had been born in Cape, and they had a lot of memories of spending time at the river. So by visiting shops and restaurants near the river, people can relive those memories that they've had. Places can provide a type of nostalgia for people, for happy times in a person's life. We recently spoke to a woman in Cape specifically about the public square in Cape, which is now known as Ivor Square. And she had many fond memories of community events that had been held there, such as concerts and Christmas programs. And when asked why the public square mattered so much to her and why, she wanted to preserve it, and it was her that got this Ivor Square movement started. She said that she wanted to preserve it because of all of the memories that she had had there growing up. She had lived in Cape for most of her life. And to her, it was not only important because of the memories she had there, but it was also important because of the memories that she wanted future generations to be able to make. She wanted to be able to preserve these places so that more memories could be made down the line. So places have a way of uniting communities and letting them make their own memories for the future, which Jennifer is going to talk a bit about.
Hey guys. Yeah, so whenever we were doing these interviews, one thing that was static throughout was that you could tell that these places had imprinted on people, and that intrinsic value was something that they wanted to communicate, whether it was something from their own personal experience or if it was a collective community experience. It just had that power that they wanted to communicate and share that with someone. So when we look into preserving these spaces, we're weaving them into the larger, bigger picture for the future generations. And that's what makes it powerful, because some of these places might have like a foundation, or it might be a building. And then some of these places might just be an open space, like a square or a park with maybe a couple statues. But when you're in that space, you are transported to that time if you have that memory. So you have the element of the physical space, and then you have the element of time. And if we're able to preserve these spaces, we can use our communication to communicate what it was like during a previous time. And it's kind of like transportation, like you get taken back to a previous memory, whether that was something you experienced yourself or something that was communicated to you by a family member or a school. That's what I got.
Great. I think one of the things, thank you, Jennifer and Molly. I think that was great. I think one of the things, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, when we were reporting out all the different groups, that at the beginning it was all these very different experiences, but the more we talked about it, we realized that all of them sort of had these common themes, right, of attaching to particular places and really connecting, as Jennifer said, to that time stream, right? And so they all had that element in one way or another, and that they all, when asked about like, well, why should we preserve this? It's like, well, it's important to me, but also other people can connect to this important time stream as well. So yeah, I think it was a really remarkable project in terms of really just talking to ordinary people, right? Not the folks who are involved in preservation like we are, but really just ordinary folks to talk about why preservation of place matters to them. Molly and Jennifer, anything else you want to add before we turn it back over to Ben?
I don't think so.
All right. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm actually going to jump in here real quick before Molly and Jennifer go away with a question about, were folks willing and excited to talk to you about their memories and, kind of, in approaching folks, how did they react to that? Is this something they wanted to share? Were they enthusiastic about it?
Yeah, I think so the way that the project worked was we all broke up into groups and we each interviewed a separate person. So Jennifer and I were in the same group and we interviewed a lady in Cape about Ivor Square, which is the public square. And she was just the entire time, she was super excited to talk about it because it's not something like a lot of these places, people see them all the time. Like you drive past the square, you drive past the river, and if you're not familiar with the area, you don't know the stories behind them. Mm-hmm. So when given the opportunity to share your memories or share your own personal stories about a specific place, everyone was really excited to do that because to them, these places really do matter because of the memories they've made there. So they wanted to be able to share that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a huge numbers person, but that's only one side of the story. And we talk a lot in the Main Street world about storytelling. And, I'm not from Cape, but I've probably been there 24, 3 times. And I have those ingrained memories of Cape, grabbing the ice cream cone from the corner store, walking down onto the river. It's just those memories. And I think people want to talk about those things. And so I think as Main Street programs, it's gathering those stories and using them to demonstrate the importance of your downtown and demonstrating the impact of downtown in many ways, whether that's numbers or whether that's storytelling, but it should probably be both of those because to get the full story. So I appreciate both of you doing that work and sharing your experience with us.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
All right. Yes, thank you. As Keith said, that storytelling element is really important and it resonates differently with different communities. Some people like the numbers, some people like the stories, some people like a little bit of both. And so Main Street programs really have to do both of those to tell that story of downtown. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bridgette Kelch, and she is going to give some examples about what Main Street programs can do. Some easy examples. You don't have to reinvent the wheel in order to celebrate preservation, not only just in May, but the entire year. So Bridgette.
Hi, it's good to be back. So as Ben mentioned, I spent 20 years working with Downtown Washington Incorporated. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I am also a student of Southeast Missouri State University's Historic Preservation Program. So as you might imagine, it comes naturally to me to be a building hugger, but I know that's not the case for everyone. So for me, Main Street was the perfect place, to be. It's a program that was created out of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So to me, it's very easy to see historic preservation happening in our everyday work in our Main Street programs. So, and when anyone would ask me for a one-sentence description of Main Street, I would simplify it down to historic preservation through economic development. So for me, everything I did throughout my day was about historic preservation. And so I can know when, it's a busy world and you can be easily overwhelmed because there's a million things to do. So I want to give you some opportunities to think about if historic preservation doesn't come to you naturally, or you don't have immediate ideas when we say, what are you doing for Historic Preservation Month? I'm going to give you some options today. And I would challenge you today also to think about, what are you doing for historic preservation every day? The reason why we're here. So to me, it comes easily because it does bring about, kind of what Molly and Jennifer brought up, that nostalgia, the warm fuzzy of yesteryear and today, and how we can revitalize and move forward. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide. I like to do it in fun ways. If you're at all familiar with my neck of the woods of Missouri, Washington, Missouri is about 45 minutes west of St. Louis, right on the Missouri River. And our area is full of lots of German ancestry that certainly loves to indulge not only in all things food, but all things beverage. And so that's not the case for everyone. So you're going to be able to take some of this and you're going to not be able to utilize some of this. It's all about what fits your community and allows you to work. So I think about, you know, if you just say, I'm going to teach you a history lesson, a lot of people are just like, I think I'm done. I don't want to sit here and listen to this. But if you can do it in a way that maybe in a very nice way tricks them into paying attention, that's a good way to move about it. So one of the things that we have in Washington is a walking tour. It's actually not even done by the Main Street program. It's put together by our historical society. And so if you have something like that, you can utilize that and do a tour. And one of the things that we typically do on different tours, like for our ghost tour, which I'll talk about later, is we have pit stops. We need some pit stops along the way to maybe have a beverage to wet our whistles as we continue to listen. So you're drawing them in. RJCs have an annual brew fest. Again, it's an event that downtown doesn't even have to put on, but it's held in our downtown district. So how can you work with that to add an element? And most likely the event coordinators of the events that are happening in your downtowns, you know, would love to have something, an additional benefit, an additional piece, even if you, you know, were able to just add an option. So like maybe if you do, we do a couple of different, we have a fake Patty's Day crawl where they do a St. Patrick's Day bar hop. And that's put on for the United Way. And so what could we do to be a part of that and add in historic preservation element, or all the festivals that you do? Washington's big on festivals. All of them usually include beverages and food, of course. And so that draws people down. So they're coming down for potentially music, food, beverages. What can you do in that moment to draw them in? Is it a little game that you set out on the picnic table saying, you know, today, 231 Main Street is the art gallery. You know, what was it, you know, in the past? And then maybe you just have some options, like a little quiz that sits there. You know, you could talk about, let's move on to the next one. Indulging the appetites. So we do a big, that's our farm to table dinner there in the center. That was a huge rage. I can't remember how many years they've done it now, probably working on 8 maybe. And we're the same. We saw it in that one viral Facebook post that somebody did, I think in Tennessee or Kentucky. And we said, we're doing that. And so we did this beautiful fancy dinner, and it was all based around historic preservation. They were sitting right next to one of the buildings that we own on Main Street. It's off to the left. You can't see it in the picture. But they were dining on local food and beverage, eating locally produced meat, vegetables. And we talked about that. We talked about the importance of farming and local entrepreneurship with our microbreweries and wineries, with lots of wineries in our area. But the whole context of the night is they were sitting in front of this historic building that they were raising money for to Tuck Point. So you're already doing lots of good things. You can always weave in an element of this. Again, with your festivals. So the taste of downtowns, you know, when you're doing that, you know, you're going to go to 6 locations, you know, these 6 restaurants are participating. You could be like, did you know that, you know, Giuseppe's was formed, you know, founded in 1920 by the family. So adding in elements that you're giving them an extra piece to remember about your downtown, or spark conversation. You know, this bakery was opened in 1950, and, you know, maybe grandpa in the group says, oh, I remember walking down there and getting a donut every Sunday morning. So invoking these memories. Your farmer's market. A lot of folks do farmer's markets. You know, how are you going to be able to weave in a fun game, an opportunity for them to learn? So if they're coming downtown regularly, there's things that all 4 points can be working on. So your design committee, you know, what can they do to work on that, your economic vitality committee. So if they're walking downtown, they're going to walk a typical path to get to the farmer's market, and maybe you have a property that's been vacant. Well, what can you do in those windows? Can you work with your design and your economic vitality committee to have historic photos, to talk about the building? It's this much square footage, you know, has this much is the rent. This is who you contact if you're interested. This is what has been in this building in the past. Let's move on to the next slide. Ghosts. Ghosts are fun. You know, whether you believe or you don't believe, it's the perfect way to sneak in some history. So we do a ghost tour. And again, it was started in the downtown program. It's graduated out of it. We actually used to provide just insurance for the person doing it. It was on our regular insurance that we already had in place. And now I think our historical society covers it. But you can do all things on a ghost tour. So our goal, because it started in the Main Street program, was to be able to talk about all 4-point committees. So we told true stories. They were real research stories about, you know, the 2 newspaper editors that shot, you know, had a shootout on Main Street. Is there a ghost there? We have no idea, but it was real history that we shared that was fun and to learn about. And of course, I talked about the stops. We made a stop at Marquardt's Landing, which is a fun sports bar and grill. You know, there's a stop at the ice cream shop, and we talk about that. So how are we fitting in, you know, promotion, economic vitality? So along the way, as we're walking and talking about these different ghost stories, we say, oh, did you notice over there that the, you know, 201 Main Street's available for rent? What would you guys love to see in there? Conversation is huge. And having these conversations about, you know, what can happen in your downtown. And you know what? The person that you're talking to may never open a business in your downtown, but they're going to talk about it and be like, you know what, Bobby, you talked about opening a clothing store. There's this super awesome spot that's in downtown that I heard about the other night on the ghost tour. It doesn't have to be hard to work through all of this. And then you say, oh, and did you notice that second floor right there? There's an apartment that's been recently renovated and it's available for rent. You know, talking about these different things, getting a word of mouth works really well in my community. We're about 15,000. We're actually a little larger, but our city limits are tight. And even in that size town and even smaller, it's going to work great. We can go to the next slide. So contests and giveaways. So you can see them in the picture here. One is our architectural treasure hunt. And so these are just photos. This has been happening in Washington. I tried to figure it out exactly because it was there long before I started. And so it's probably close to 40 years old. And so it's started out, you know, black and white in the newspaper. One of the things that organically happened with this is that at the time when I was downtown, we had 3 elementary schools, 1 public and 2 parochial. And we actually were able to convince it was easier for the parochial schools to do it. And then the public school was able to get on board. The students did walking tours and they got to try and figure out where these buildings were. And once I realized, I really thought about it. I was like, that's the key. That is how, you know, we're going to make downtown relevant for years to come, is engaging the youth. And so it seems like such a daunting task to talk people into historic preservation, or maybe even talk yourself into historic preservation, but also how to get your community to be aware and engaged. And so the architectural treasure hunt is great. It's just photos and they get to guess. We used to give away savings bonds. They don't do those. Those are too hard to get now. So we do downtown gift certificates, our little prize package. We do a book every year called our Invitation to Downtown Washington. This year they did something really fun. It was all door styles, just saying, where is this door? And they could turn it in and win a gift certificate. That's historic preservation. You're making them aware. You're helping them create memories about your downtown community. You're recalling old memories. You know, that door's been there for over 100 years. To me, this is exciting and super fun to talk about. You can do, one of the things that I thought of recently, that I'm working on for a different group, my church is doing a trivia night. And they, you know, we're asking for different categories. So I created a trivia section just on our building plaques. So our design committee has worked in conjunction with our Historic Preservation Commission at the city. we're a certified local government in Washington, so we have a historic preservation commission, and we have been marking the buildings for the last 10 years in our downtown historic district. And so what I did is, on one category, it's just the picture of the plaque and what building is this, and you can identify it by the specific address or by a well-known business, past or present. They can identify that. So you can see, like, the Wolf Hotel is a picture, is a plaque, one of the plaques that we have up. And today that is a bar called the 1869 Social House. So those are fun. So quizzes, if you have something ready-made, there's so many trivia nights. If you have some ready-made stuff that you can be able to start giving, to let other groups do your work for you and spread the knowledge and the love of downtown, foster conversations. And all you did was take some time to put together 10 questions, in variable opportunities, whether it's photos or just direct questions. I will caution you, like, sometimes I'm too hard because I knew too much about downtown. And so I really had to make it a little easier to answer some of these questions and not make them so abstract. But it's a lot of fun. And, I spent some time at our local historical society, and these partnerships are what's going to help you. Like I said, you don't have to recreate the wheel. There are so many opportunities that are already in place that you can utilize. Social media is huge. In so many ways you can be doing this, from in the spring, on the Four Seasons. Missouri Main Street has this great maintenance guide that I think we R&D'd from the Illinois Main Street program years ago. And so, every spring, maybe you say, and the people can do this for their homes too. It's not even historic all the way. It's just maintenance. So talking about something that's super not fun, but it's a way to put that out there. And that's historic preservation. You're helping someone, think about their building. Spring is when you walk the roof or walk the perimeter and look for water. And summer is when you look at tuck pointing. So there's stuff that's already in place that you can get and utilize. The social media is also going to be great for, before and afters, yesterday and today photos. And don't always go super old. I forget that my childhood is now 30 plus years ago. And so, yes, it's fun to share the 1880 photos and the 1910s, but don't forget to share the 1960 and the 1990 photos, because, you have a whole new realm of people that are going to remember these. And thinking about photos too that have a lot of people, that you encourage them to tag. Our Catholic high school, they're not located downtown, but the elementary school is, and they usually do their prom dinner and everything in the downtown kind of parish center. And so having those photos, those archive of photos, and then people can tag. And so we usually will be like, find yourself from the class of 1998 and share your favorite downtown memory. That's historic preservation. You're fostering that, familiar sight, a photo, what's your favorite smell downtown? Even just an answer. Be careful, because some people will probably share. We live on a river, so sometimes the smells aren't so great in farmland. But it's comfort, it's calming, it's belongingness. It can be in a sense of you're fostering affiliation. That they have a common thing. And I think definitely since the pandemic, that's important. We are a little more isolated, a little harder to meet people, to be able to, have that sense of engagement. And these items are going to help you do that. And the underlying thing, which is also very important to Main Street programs, is fundraising, thinking about the bottom line. So you're doing all these fun things, but somebody's got to pay the electric bill and eventually your staff person. And so as you're fostering all of this familiarity, belongingness, it's been much easier to ask someone to support, be a friend of downtown. Would you sponsor the architectural treasure hunt? How about, you be a part of the taste of downtown? And so you're building a tradition that I go to your festival, Art Fair and Wine Fest, every year. We have a festival that's, over 40 years old. And so being able to use that, and it's okay if you're starting out at the beginning, my festival is year one, do something that has that sense of tradition. We can go to the next slide. Childhood memories are huge. For me, where's the first time I ever saw Santa was downtown. It kind of came, that photo on the right in the green, that's a postcard that we used to send out. And we talked about, remember when you first met Santa? That's actually my dad in that photo. And he's on Main Street at at Cruel's, the store pictured right next to it, visiting Santa. And so Cruel's is long gone, a business that hasn't been around for many, many years, but lots of people remember that's where he went for Christmas shopping. And then, where you found the perfect gift, remembering that, and where you were dazzled by the holiday lights. And then we said, we're still here, rediscover downtown Washington. That postcard's probably 15, 20 years old at this point. So, I mean, they don't use it anymore, but it's something that you can take and make your own, and do something like that. So there's a lot of those memories. It kind of came around, fully around for me. And that photo on the left, that's my dad, who plays Santa for downtown and has for the last 10 plus years. So that's the mayor. We made this fake switch that turns on the Christmas tree after the parade, and that's such a huge piece. So we do, and the mayor in the photo, she's no longer the mayor, but she started the tradition of the parade ends, and then you all gather around the Christmas tree. We sing 3 Christmas songs, and then we do a countdown, and the Santa and the mayor turn on the tree. And so that's been happening for 15 years. And it's a tradition now. It's a memory. You're making a core memory for these kids and their parents of this is what we do. We spend our time downtown. And that's really one of the most important things. And the nosy nature, everybody's nosy. So you have the opportunity to do all kinds of things. The really cool thing about this is the middle one is hidden spaces, secret places. This was Jefferson City, downtown Jefferson City, Missouri did this. And as you can tell, they didn't even clean up. Sometimes people are just nosy and want to see. But what happens when you get them into these spaces is they get ideas. This could be the most amazing apartment. This could be my law office. This could be a great office for the CPA. So you're getting them up there. Holiday house tours is one of our bigger fundraisers, or a nice fundraiser. It's not one of our biggest in Washington, but you're getting them in to appreciate these historic structures. And this is, again, something that's been going on for 20 plus years. So it's a memory thing. Let's see. Doing, your design committee can do historic photos in businesses that are a conversation place, especially in a waiting area. Host open houses with your economic vitality committee. We did that. We did 2 different properties that we did open houses for, and they were both purchased within a month. And that didn't happen before that time. And so, being able to, we had all the photos on site. We're able to talk to the developer. We didn't even know who was a developer, but he had the idea. He actually took the building back, one of them back to what it looked like after it was renovated heavily in the 1960s. So I hope this has been helpful for you. The interviews, if you can do these interviews, a photo and a blurb, on Instagram, or a short reel or video, and you can use these for many years to come. So hopefully I was able to give you some easy ideas for you to put in and not have to reinvent the wheel in your busy, busy schedules as they exist already. Next, we'll have Karen Bode Baxter is going to share with you some of her ideas.
Yes, thank you, Bridget. I really appreciate it. So yeah, Karen is going to talk about partnerships. Again, kind of playing off of what Bridget talked about, that you can partner. It doesn't have to just be the Main Street organization. You can partner with other entities in the community as you're doing this, and then give a couple of more examples on how Main Street organizations can celebrate Preservation Month, and a couple of things that you can proactively do even throughout the year as well. So, Karen?
Hi,
There you go.
there we go. Yes, I wanted to just re-emphasize all of what Bridget is saying is that it's not that you have to spend a lot of your own time doing many of these projects. It's you tie in to things that are being done with other organizations or other entities. One of the things that many, many years ago, when I was a Main Street director, is we tied in with the local middle school arts teacher who was getting residents, artists in residence to come to her classes. One year it was a photographer who was teaching the students how to take photographs. And so we had that architectural scavenger hunt, but it was all the work was being done by the artist in residence, the photographer and the art teacher, working with the students. They had a tour of the downtown, and then they took their photographs, and then they selected which were the best of the photographs. And they were, at that time, it was published in the newspaper as the architectural scavenger hunt for everybody in the community to begin to look and see what building are we talking about in the downtown. But it also was on a poster. And I don't know if you can see this, but this was sponsored by the local arts council. They were much more involved in all of this than I, as the Main Street director, or my design committee members were involved. It was, hey, we just turned it over to them, and they did all the work. And in fact, then the arts teacher came back another year, and they had an artist in residence program at the school to teach the students how to do line drawings. And so they came back and they did a whole series. Each student was supposed to pick out a detail on a building, a historic building, and they drew it up, and we put all of their drawings in an exhibit in one of the vacant historic buildings downtown in their display window, and also produced the poster that everybody wanted to see their child's drawing in the exhibit downtown, but they also got to see all these posters posted all over. Next slide. And then also, thinking about organizations, as Bridgette said, there's bound to be a local history group, historical society, or some group that in your community that you could coordinate with to help produce that walking tour, or like a walking tour. I call it a brochure, but it may be something that you can share on social media now. But if you notice that on this one in particular from Grinnell, when I was the director there, that it was produced by the J.B. Grinnell Group, which was their local historical organization. They did all the work. I didn't have to do anything, except I provided them with a copy of our National Register Historic District nomination, where it described all of these buildings and gave historical information. They took it, they put it together in the format and made the little descriptions of all the different buildings. But you also notice that it was sponsored also by that Arts Council, and some of our businesses that in the downtown that wanted to be able to pass out the brochure at their restaurants. So two of the main restaurants in town wanted to be able to pass this out. So they became sponsors of this brochure, printing it up, as well as one of our major employers in town. Next. Having events and activities in these historic spaces it brings people together to appreciate them in a way that you don't during your everyday life. This is on the corner there is a bank building that is a National Historic Landmark in Grinnell. It's a bank building designed by Louis Sullivan, a famous architect. And like Bridgette said, maybe you're not into all of that, but in this town, everybody went to bank there every day. They took their receipts from their business and deposited them. We all went into this lobby. But we just went in, we did our work, at the bank teller town, and then left. We didn't stop to appreciate it for what it was as a wonderful historic building that was drawing busloads of tourists to our town on a regular basis because it was a Louis Sullivan design. But by having an event that we were already planning be in this building instead of the back room of the local restaurant, which was our annual volunteer appreciation night party reception. I got 500 people that were volunteers, sponsors of Main Street activities, members and the corporate donors, all to be inside this building in an evening where they could just enjoy the wonderful architecture on the inside. You want to go to the next one? And then, thinking about it, just think in terms of there are opportunities where you might be able to have a variety of receptions that are being planned anyway, or as Main Street events. This was actually a reception that in Sedalia that the Main Street organization helped organize to thank Missouri Preservation and all of the speakers and sponsors of the Missouri Preservation Conference that were coming to have the conference in downtown Sedalia. And so this is in their old depot building, which got all sorts of people inside for a change that they never saw the interior of that space locally because they just weren't in it. And that also happened in University City, Missouri Preservation Conference. Hey, all of a sudden, people were getting to be on that top floor of their city hall. It's a wonderful space, but rarely do people get inside there, and they could now appreciate the space. Go on, okay. But also there might be opportunities to showcase kind of some of your recent preservation success stories, bringing some buildings that may have been long vacant back to life. I know that Steve Hoffman can appreciate that with the Broadway Theater in Cape. But this was in Fulton, where they had converted this theater in basically an event center that still could use the stage for some events, and that it was a great way to showcase this space was by having an event in there and seeing the wonderful architecture of the interior that had some of these Art Deco traits to it. Then it was not an event that Main Street had to plan. This is something that now is occurring whenever there's an event going on in the downtown, in that place. But also there's those opportunities because your old buildings are being adapted to new uses. And in this case, this was in Joplin, where they had just adapted the vacant large department store building to become Joplin City Hall, with all the offices and the meeting rooms and everything for the city hall to use. And this was not the last year's Missouri Preservation Conference, but these photos are courtesy from the one that was the year after the horrible tornado. And the city turned over their new city hall to Missouri Preservation to use as a conference site. But it showcased that wonderful historic building. Then also it could be, as Bridgette said, it's kind of these behind the scene tours. This is one on in a commercial district here in St. Louis that's known as the Grove. This is a corner, a prominent corner used by many people. That they had a tour, they had an event there in the middle of renovation, and then Old Town Cape has been doing similar to what Bridgette talked about, with having open houses, that they did it as a kind of a group day event, where you could go to several different places that showcased available spaces that were for lease, or buildings that were really in need of somebody to take them on to rehab them. And I thought that was a really great approach. This was something their Economic Vitality Committee and their Design Committee were probably coordinating on, to get people into these spaces and hopefully end up leasing, and maybe even finding an investor to rehab some of these buildings.
Yeah,
So,
Karen, actually, I wrote that down. Thank you for covering that. Ben and I use that example all the time. And back to what Bridgette said earlier, and actually, if we could have the rest of the panelists come back on screen for the Q&A portion. We are running out of time, but Bridgette shared, and when Ben and I tell this story, that people are nosy. They remember what used to be in that building, and they want to see it again. And every time Cape Girardeau has done this commercial vacant property tour, open house, they work with property owners, they work with realtors. They have rented space every time they have done it, and they've done it for many years. It's a great activity that not only is an EV function, an Economic Vitality Committee function, but also covers that design piece of it, because usually there's a little display there with a little bit of history on it. Or the property owner talking about the space, or the realtor. So those can be fun things too, that then, we're covering more than one point, which we always promote. And what you as speakers all presented were great, awesome ideas of how to not reinvent the wheel, but also how can we take something we're already doing? How can we partner with another organization? Ghost tours. I used to run the Elms Hotel in Excelsior Springs. The ghost tour for that building is sold out every time. And it's not only the fun stories about the ghost, but it's the fun stories about the building and the history and the culture that takes place there. Bridgette also mentioned that the Washington Main Street program is doing a doors promotion this year. So is Liberty, which is kind of funny, because we as Missouri Main Street started talking about this last fall for something to do at the state conference in July. So watch for that. We're going to do a contest for the doors, the stories that doors tell within our communities across the state. So we're going to do a competition. You've probably seen other organizations do the windows of, and so all of those things bring awareness, but also can be fundraisers. Some of the things Bridgette shared too about, involving food and beverage and tours and whatnot. Those can become great little fundraisers for the organization also, to help you pay for the other programming that you do. And Karen, I loved your examples of the walking tours and partnering with the Historical Society or your historical group. Sponsors love that stuff too, to pay for that. While a lot of those have moved to digital, you can use your QR code. You still need a map for folks that are still very tactile and want to hold that map in their hand. So, getting sponsors to help pay for that. Corporations and businesses within the communities like to sponsor those things because it puts their name on those. So just a ton of great ideas. for our Main Street programs, that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I go back to that. Telling the stories of our downtowns are so important. Part of the national Main Street, the Main Street America accreditation standards, one whole standard is built around preservation. And how do we educate and advocate, sharing the knowledge, sharing the stories of our downtowns with our communities, because it's our downtowns that make us unique. And so I think you guys have all provided some great resources for our Main Street programs, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel and can get something going for Preservation Month, which starts on May the 1st. So please take some of these ideas, integrate them within your program, within your community, and share them. When you're doing them in May, share them with us at Missouri Main Street, and log them for your assessment for next year, because you're going to have to include those examples. And so I appreciate all of you for being here. Karen, Bridgette, Stephen, Molly, Jennifer, and Ben, who leads our Historic Preservation Commission with John Vietmeyer. Thank you all for being here today, and go out and be Main Street preservationist. Thank you all. Have a great day.